Welcome, Mr. Caan Berry. Thanks so much for making the time, mate. YouTube extraordinaire and big volume Betfair user. And you're also providing stuff for us on the Betfair Hub. Today, we're going to try and pick your brain and inspire some other traders out there with your nuggets of wisdom. I just want to start from the start in terms of your Betfair journey, probably going back, a decade. How did you start betting on Betfair?
At the time when I first registered an account, I wasn't even actually really aware too much about the whole exchange concept. I was just punting on horses, so trying to read a bit of form, doing my brains. So I registered in 2007, but it wasn't until sort of 2009 where I started to find trading and taking it seriously. Obviously didn't have the cash out button back then, so it was a different game altogether.
So you were just pickling away, trying your best on the weekend?
Yeah. It started with a bit of punting. In fact, there was a program in the UK. It was like one of these very brief, sort of in the interludes that students do sometimes, and they visited a guy that was actually trading on Betfair, and that was sort of pricked my ears up to it. And from that point onwards, I sort of found some software and stuff like that, and that was away.
And when did you start taking it seriously and think, hey, there might be an income in this?
Once I found the software and stuff like that, I was hooked on the whole trading concept and activity. It seemed maybe a little bit more noble to me. Yeah. When I have conversations outside of Betfair, obviously a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's gambling," but it's sort of a different sort of approach for me. So it was around about 2009 when I got a little bit serious into it, and it probably wasn't until 2010, a little bit after, I started to make good money.
So you found the third-party software pretty quickly?
More or less. It wasn't long. It wasn't long after using the exchange and realising how the exchange worked, the fact that you can lay bets as well as back bets, that I found the software, and that's what really sort of towed me into it, I can say, yeah.
And you were Geek's Toy from day one?
I tried them all, as everyone does. It was just the one I settled at purely because I could customise it more, sort of fit it to my screen, all that kind of stuff. So never went back.
Yeah, I like the UX. It's pretty simple, intuitive. It's fun to play with too.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's good to be able to mould it to what you're actually doing, rather than being stuck with standard template. Well, it was for the way I approach things anyway. Different sports.
And you were just doing UK racing?
I've done a little bit of tennis and that as well, but predominantly I started with the racing. Racing was what I was interested in. A very normal background. I was in the army before, so I didn't have like any kind of financial background or any job like that. So it was purely horse racing, having a punt, and then following the numbers and the volumes in the markets and stuff like that.
And where did the trading come from? Were you reading books on trading other financial markets, or?
Yeah, I read a little bit about financials. I don't think they overlap heavily. They probably do in like the psychological aspects, that kind of stuff. It's really important.
Right.
But I probably went the long way around, if I'm honest. Banging my head against the wall for a long time, looking at a lot of markets. But when I started, there was very little information out there. You've obviously got the hubs, stuff like that now. So if you want to get going, there's content you can absorb to get a quicker start. But there wasn't even really much basic stuff back then.
And is that why you started your YouTube channel? Because there wasn't a resource for other people to learn from?
Yeah. I mean, initially my whole sort of public journey, if you like, started. I sort of kept a blog just for discipline reasons, just so that people could sort of check in and I could hold myself accountable online in front of people. Nice. There was a little community going on. It was more before social media was mad and all that kind of stuff. So started with that, and then I guess that's when YouTube was getting going. So I thought, stick up a couple of videos. People used to ask me to do stuff like that, so I was like, oh God, why not?
And you're punting now, is that exclusively racing or tennis, other sports?
Yeah, tennis. So the bigger events, I'll look at tennis more. It's more exclusively racing. It always has been. To be honest, the markets behave completely differently because with horse racing markets, they're more sentiment driven. So it's more opinion based. There's a lot more trading the volumes and that kind of stuff. It's sort of like trading perception rather than when you look at tennis, it's more mechanical. I mean, you can't argue if it's 40 love. It's 40 love. So, sort of more price modeling, stuff like that.
And so with horse racing, there's just so much opinion about multiple runners, and that makes the market unique comparative to sport?
It does indeed, yeah. So the activity picks up probably later than some of the bigger sports like cricket, football, stuff like that. Picks up the last sort of 8 minutes typically. It depends on the event, like your premium events, it'll be like 15, 20 minutes beforehand, like Cheltenham, stuff like that over in the UK. But yeah, it's more sentiment driven and sort of like traded volumes, opinion, trading the flow of orders in the market rather than, I've priced this for the end of set and it's not that price.
Yeah, right. And do you do a lot of homework before you start trading a particular event?
Not really so much, no. Like I have, so I'm very hot on like the characteristics and limitations within a market, and how basically the boundaries to the point at which they can go, and different players that would be involved in different markets. So you can think about your lower quality events. It's probably more likely to be a gamble because the trainer and whoever owns it's got to make their money somehow, right? And they're not going to make it from the prize money if it's low quality. So. I bear all those kind of things in mind, which are really important. But when I first started trading, I actually had very little clue about how the racing actually functions. I wasn't kind of like a pro form reader or something like that at the start at all. Yeah. So I don't actually have too much of a heavier view, and I think that actually benefits me because you can kind of fall in love with the idea of the price should be going here, and that's just you're selling yourself up the river a lot of the time when you do that. So.
Yeah, got you. And with racing, have you played much on the Australian markets? And how do they differ from the UK racing?
I have. How does it differ? Well, I think your weather's a lot better. And and it means getting up at a really silly o'clock time here. But, aside from that, the markets are quite similar. They're less liquid. Obviously, you've got things like Flemington, which are quite popular over in Australia. But in terms of my own trading activity, I've tried in the past, but it's not really been worth getting up at like 4 a.m. or whatever time it is. Right. Purely because of the latency issues as well. So we tend to get a little bit delayed data here.
So an early alarm clock and you're a few seconds behind.
Well, it's probably not that bad, and it's probably not that bad now. I mean, I'm talking more historically in the past when I first got involved. I looked at it more then, but you don't really want to be trading on old information, especially if it's quite reactive with what you're doing, which, what I do is quite reactive. So most
of your UK racing action is pre-play or is it in play?
So pre-play, but then there's like the overlap between the two a little as well. I've got a cool little edge there. It's not huge, but it's quite consistent. So I do that too. But the majority of which is like, that last 8 minutes, if I'm really honest, the last 5 minutes.
And then you get out once they jump and then you're just watching and waiting for the result.
Yeah.
And then talk to me about the mental side of punting. Is that something that you've looked into a lot for your personal use, or have you done a lot of research in terms of how that influences other punters and there might be some opportunities that pop up?
It's huge. It's huge. And it's probably like the biggest thing that I tussled with early on. Because if your mindset's in a market where everything's a little bit wishy-washy and not mechanical, like tennis, football, cricket, then if your mind's not straight, then that's probably your biggest hurdle. But it can be a large part of your advantage as well, because obviously everyone else is suffering that same problem. And psychology routinely creeps into the market. So you see money coming in, occasionally you'll see other people getting in trouble that might push the price where it shouldn't be. And so, everybody's providing each other value at times, depending on what they're doing.
Gotcha. So are you pretty disciplined at keeping that balance? Are you exercising? What do you do to keep a clear head?
Yeah, I keep quite a strict routine. I do exercise regularly and stuff like that. I like to have a little start-up routine before I get going. Make sure that I'm starting sort of clear and not like, outside influences. They're all dealt with first. That's all really, really important to me.
Are you really disciplined at tracking results and keeping score every day?
Not over the short term. Because, again, I've found actually it's more beneficial for me. And I think it probably varies a little bit for some people. But if you're constantly looking at your balance and you're looking at the scorecard and it's affecting how you're feeling and what you're doing next. And, what really matters is over the longer period. I remember in the early days where I first went full time, I was checking it a lot, like as you would expect. I mean, I had money stashed in the bank. I'd already been doing well part-time on the side for quite a while. But I found myself checking that consistently, and it doesn't really do me any benefit. There's no real upside to that. So I look at it a little bit further apart. But.
So do you download your transactions every few months and just start reviewing things that way, or?
I'll probably look at it sort of like fortnightly, to be honest, more than anything. Yeah. Like I said, at the beginning, I was kind of checking it up every couple of hours even, every day, which is just not healthy at all. But I found, I mean, it gets easier over time as you make more money, right? You get less anxious because you don't really care because you know that life's good, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sort of like fortnightly, but it's been a long time now. So
Now you talk about protecting your risks in some of your material. How do you balance that out between betting up when you spot an opportunity that suits your edge, just sticking out?
managing the risk. So I mean, the one thing I find myself saying all the time when I talk about this sort of stuff is like it's not necessarily what you do, it's what you don't do, and that's kind of like that's always the last thing that everybody wants to hear, right? Because all they want to hear about is making loads of money. But the reality is, like, if you manage the downside, then probability will do the rest, and eventually you'll end up up. So I think the biggest thing is literally sitting on my hands and doing nothing when there's not that opportunity.
Right. So the key thing is patience. Just you don't want to just be betting because you're sitting in front of the screen and you've allocated time to bet.
Yeah, which links back to the whole psychological thing we were talking about previously. It's like, you know, like consistency as such is sort of like it's a state of mind. It's not actually got very little to do with the market. It's when you're not sort of getting involved too early, which is very common amongst people, or over trading, over staking, and just kind of accept the opportunity for what it is, and sort of you can't push it any further. You take what you can, and that's cool.
Yeah. And then just specific advice for people starting out and people really inspired by you. Which markets would you suggest they start with?
That's a good one, a deep one. There's lots of different types of opportunity. So I would say, rather than saying you certainly want to give you an arbitrary this race or, you know, on this day, wouldn't quite work like that. I'd say stick to one type at a time. So if you're looking at horse racing, maybe start looking at handicaps. They make up typically about 50% of horse racing. So that's a decent place to start if you want lots of different things to trade. Or maybe look at like maiden races, and they all behave differently with those different characteristics which I mentioned earlier. So what I'm trying to say is, rather than picking a day, because every day has got lots of different types and lots of different things going on, pick the different types and focus on them, because otherwise, you know, you can't see the wood for the trees a lot of the time, because a new person comes into it and they think, well, I'm trading horse racing, and yes, you are, but there's so many different strains of horse racing. You go from one to the next and you're like, well, that didn't happen in the last one. And it's like, well, it wouldn't, because it's completely different, you know?
Yeah, good tip. So would you be recommending starting on, you know, the highest quality, most liquid races, or is it better to focus on those B and C grade horse races to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it comes back to depend on what you're actually doing. The big races are very attractive. They hold the most opportunity. At the end of the day, if there's more turnover, then there's more opportunity in the markets. There's more people offering their money up at bad value. There's plenty of people that don't really care about the price they get, which is great to trade. So you want to look. You can look at the big ones, but if you're looking at the big ones, you're looking at turning over more money in a tighter range. But, you know, on the other hand, you could say, look at those B and C grade meetings, like you said there, leave your money far out from the spread. There's still lots of opportunity. You get an opportunistic fill, and then you're in the money as well. So it's kind of like, you know, what do you prefer, marathon or sprint, you know?
Yeah, good analogy. Do you think people should focus on, you know, the most attractive Betfair sport, which could be racing because there's so many markets and they're so liquid, or focus on something you love, which, you know, might be tennis or something like that?
Sure, you got to do something you love, right? I mean, you can come into racing and say, I don't know nothing about racing and I'm going to learn to trade it. But at the end of the day, you're going to be sat in front of the screen in front of a lot of horse racing, and if you can't bear that, then why do it? Like, if you love horse racing, by all means. The same goes with the tennis. They just trade very differently. I would say, out of the trading activity that I do, if I'm trading a tennis match, I'll find I may sit there for ages and not really do a lot, and then there'll be something. But the good thing about tennis, it's more liquid. There's bigger stakes. There's these big swings, stuff like that. You can go on for a larger stake. So I'll sort of sit there and watch paint and dry for ages, then have a large trade. Or horse racing, it suits my personality more, because it's just like little bit, just constantly picking up 20s, 50s, stuff like that.
And just getting specific with tennis for a second, are you watching the footage on the TV and sort of picking up player cues and chiming in that way? Or are you exclusively just watching market graphs and stuff like that and betting off the market movement?
Sure. I mean, different players have different characteristics. Some perform better under pressure, stuff like that. but it's more a case of there are certain areas within a match that I'll focus on, because that will match up with the market, and the way the price moves, it will be, basically be more compressed. So the downside will be lower, the upside will be bigger. So again, like I said, I'll sit for ages. There'll be in situations where I'll be interested in getting involved. Doesn't necessarily mean I will get involved every time, because there has to be the right things present. But that's basically I won't be competing for information, because obviously, as we know, some people are ahead of various feeds and they've got a speed advantage. So I'm not even going to try and compete with those people.
Yeah, right. And in your early days, did you go to the track or sit in the stands and try and bet in play that way?
No, I haven't. I've often thought about it. I've never actually done it. I've met quite a lot of people that have done it. Some that have done it very successfully as well. The closest I've come to it, I think, was probably in the Betfair box at Ascot. So, but even then, there's people way ahead of me even at the course.
Yeah. And just talk to me about your home setup for a second. We can see 2 monitors there. Is one for Geeks Toy and the other one's for doing your homework, or?
That's exactly it. Yeah, the other one I have like video feeds, information, potential track prices, stuff like that for live shows, and of course a spare laptop, stuff like that. Backup connection. It's always good to have it on your phone as well, the app, just in case there's a problem with your connection and it dies.
Yeah, nice one. And just talk to me about the life of a pro punter for a second. It's not often talked about, but it can be a pretty isolating profession without the banter, and it can be also hard to have that discipline to get up and go to work every day, which you probably handled fine with your army background. But can you speak to that for a second, just in terms of the isolation and the discipline to be a pro punter?
Yeah, that is something that's massively underrated, and it can be quite solitary. And I think that's why it's important but it's part of the psychological things that I've been through as well. I think you sort of learn what's healthy for you, and you build up and adapt as a person almost, even you kind of have to. But it can be very solitary, without a doubt, yeah.
But do you just know that comes with the game, or do you do something to stay on top of that?
Yeah, no, I quite like it. I mean, it's freedom at the end of the day. I mean, but previously, and you have to be at work at a certain time and do things that you wouldn't want to do. It's far better. It's easily forgotten. It's far better. In the early days, I did become a bit of a sucker for getting up late, just sort of trading for a few hours in the afternoon, knocking it off, going down the beer garden in the summer. All brilliant. Still do those things from time to time, but probably did it too much. But you just got to find where you fit, right? Yeah,
cool. So changing gears for a second, your YouTube journey is incredible. You got over 250 videos there, 6 or 7 years you've been at it. What inspired you to get started there?
Wow, I didn't realise it was quite that many. It's been a while. It's not been 10 years, I don't think yet, but it must be at least 7, 6, something like that. So as I mentioned earlier, the blog started early on. A lot of people started asking questions, and then we had created a couple of course packages on there as well, video packages and stuff like that. So it was all kind of born out of not an accident, but it wasn't my intention. And like I said, you have that spare time. You're sat around in the morning. The racing doesn't start until 2 o'clock sometimes in the summer in the UK. So you've got a big chunk of time. It's like, what should I do this time? Had the blog, people asking questions. It just seemed like a natural thing to do, really. Plus, also the whole solitary thing about people around you. They don't really get trading, and they don't get Betfair. They don't even get lay betting a lot of the time. Even once you've explained it, they don't get it. So it was kind of great to communicate with people that are on a similar level, and the only way to do that really is online.
Did you have some good forums or places to share war stories or mentors to bounce stuff off in the past?
I started out on software forums. Because of the way the internet's gone and social media has kind of gone up, they've gone down and they're not really as popular anymore. But yeah, that's pretty much what used to happen. I think you find it more now on places like Twitter, amongst all the chaff that's on there as well.
Yep. But those forums were great for community and stuff?
Oh yeah, and there's still good resources to go back and look at, even if it's like posts from the past, because although market variables, different things within the market might change a little, the overall stuff never really changes that much.
There's a bunch of good automation help on those forums. Is that something you've explored? Are you actively betting automated, or you haven't touched it?
No, it's not something I actively do. I have had a look. Gruss is a good bit of software that's got lots of automation features in there as well. a couple of people I've been friendly with have been kind enough to share various sheets and stuff with me in the past. So I'm not like completely alien to it, but I decided quite very early on, you know, I come from a normal background, like working class background. I was in the army. I'm not the kind of person with, you know, 6 fingers and a pointy head and sort of like spewing algorithms everywhere. That's just not me. So I just decided early on that I wasn't going to go down that route.
Yeah, beauty. So you're comfortable with your strategy and you don't really need to complicate things. Makes sense? All right, thanks so much for joining me, mate. Really appreciate it. People, if you're looking for more Caan, just Google the great man. You'll find over 250 videos on his YouTube channel. Hopefully you'll find the Betfair Hub content that he's written. He got some great courses out there. Thanks so much for taking the time, mate. Everyone interested, please, we've got some links down the bottom of the video and you can find some good Caan stuff on the Betfair Hub. Subscribe to the YouTube and any comments, please fire away. Either myself or Caan, preferably Caan, we'll answer them. Thanks a lot, guys.